Ms. Arquette is an actress from Chicago, Illinois, who has starred in multiple critically acclaimed films, including the 2014 independent drama Boyhood. Ms. Arquette has been an outspoken supporter of women's rights and the Equal Rights Amendment, and has used her platform to raise more awareness for gender equality issues. Ms. Jessica Neuwirth is the president and director of the newly formed ERA Coalition Fund for Women's Equality, and author of Equal Means Equal: Why the Time for the ERA is Now. She is also the director of Donor Direct Action and a founder of Equality Now. Now, let me just remind the members of the committee that we're going to be losing some members early, so we want to move. We're going to have to move along, and I want members to have as much of an opportunity to hear as much testimony as possible. Ms. Arquette.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to be here to testify for the Equal Rights Amendment. It's ironic that we stand on the brink of history, possibly electing the first woman to lead our nation, while the reality is that even as our seated leader, she will not have full constitutional protections simply because she was born female. Many people think women have constitutional equality, but we do not. To quote Supreme Court Justice Scalia, certainly the Constitution does not require discrimination on the basis of sex. The question is whether it prohibits it. It doesn't. And he's right, it does not. And we see that impact in critical court decisions. Women have piecemeal legislation that changes according to who is in power at any given time. Legislation that again and again is dismantled and rendered ineffective by the federal courts, like the Violence Against Women Act, which initially gave women a federal remedy for gender-based violence. This provision of the law was struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court as unconstitutional when a campus sexual assault victim, Christy Broncala, tried to use it. We also see glaring injustices in state laws. In Louisiana, for instance, women are not given a free DNA rape kit to collect the forensic evidence that could convict her rapist if she had a felony conviction in the last 5 years or was committing a crime at the time of her rape. Or in Massachusetts, where women have to appeal every 6 months to make sure that their DNA forensic evidence is not destroyed while they are waiting for prosecution, even though the statute of limitations for rape in that state is 15 years. Now, this is unfair hardship, not placed on other classes or crime victims. This is reserved for rape victims, who are largely women. And even when our beautiful brothers are the victims of rape, in Utah, a male rape victim has a 46% higher likelihood of having his DNA rape kit processed than female victims of rape. Look, I want all victims of rape to have their rape kits processed regardless of sex. But what we are looking at here is a clear example of unconscious gender bias and how women are legally treated as subhuman. We have had hundreds of thousands of unprocessed rape kits languishing on shelves across the nation. Even as I stand here, there are states that don't even know where or how many untested rape kits they have. At its best, this is unconscious gender bias, and at its worst, it's a gender-based criminal neglect. And even when women do get to the courthouse doors, the wheels of justice are still frozen for them. The woeful injustice in the recent Stanford rape case is sadly not an anomaly. That is the norm. We need to examine this, as well as why there's not adequate funding for other areas that largely affect women, like domestic violence support. In America, we have 10,000 women and children turned away from domestic abuse services daily. That is 3.5 million women and kids a year. So why is funding inadequate? I'll tell you why. Because women do not hold the same value in our society. And that is a fact that is borne out in our founding document. Women in America do not have constitutional equality. They have partial rights, and therefore they have partial justice. We have had widespread and historic gender bias at play, and it will not be remedied with anything short of the Equal Rights Amendment. The ERA would ensure that women's rights are not left in a gray area or left to the mercy of state laws, some of which are weaker than others. Why should women in one state have fewer rights than women in another? There should be equal rights for all women regardless of what state they live in. Federal courts should not be able to judge women's rights by a lower standard of review, because discrimination against women has been deemed worthy. Federal courts should not be able to judge women's rights by a lower standard of review, because discrimination against women has not been deemed worthy of strict scrutiny, which is the higher standard of review afforded other forms of discrimination by the federal courts. Legally, morally, and ethically, the truth is, this nation has turned a blind eye to widespread gender bias. Economically, women have historically been discriminated against. Just look at the pay case of Lilly Ledbetter, in which Congress had to overturn the Supreme Court decision with legislation just to ensure that when women win their equal pay claims, that they can get the equal pay they were denied. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, speaking for the dissenting judges, stated, "In our view, the court does not comprehend or is indifferent to the insidious way in which women can be victims of pay discrimination." It's estimated that it will take from 40 to 118 years to close the gender wage gap. This is not 1787 when the Constitution was drafted. In today's America, we have millions of women as the sole breadwinners. We have an estimated 33 million women and children living in poverty in the United States who would not be if women were just paid their full dollar. America has more elderly women in poverty than any other nation in the industrialized world. The remedy is to give women every fair legal tool to examine, challenge, and tear out widespread and historic bias at its roots. Once and for all, don't women deserve full legal rights in the United States of America? Because make no mistake, when you have the extra scrutiny and legal protection a constitutional amendment affords you, you have more likelihood of winning cases and enacting strong and just laws. Women need this legal framework to challenge discrimination on equal pay, rape, and domestic violence cases. Without the ERA, women are left to the mercy of courts and politicians, both state and federal, who often do little or nothing for gender justice. Equal means equal, or it means nothing at all. What is the ERA? It's a few simple words. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. Is that really a principle that anyone can oppose? In a new poll out today, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, 94% of those polled said they would support an amendment for the Constitution that guarantees equal rights for both men and women. I'm appealing for you not to just put this in your platform or to sign your name to bills that are never even taken to the floor for a vote. I am asking you to prioritize the ERA and to take action to make this much and long-needed change to help women finally have full equal rights and full protection of the law in the United States of America. It is time to finally rise up and include women in the promise of justice for all.
Thank you very much. Ms. Neuwirth, did you have a statement?
I would like to just elaborate on the poll that Patricia Arquette mentioned, because we released this poll yesterday and it shocked the pollsters. They said they had never seen any kind of consensus like that it was just extraordinary. Across the board, 94% of the people polled support a constitutional amendment for equal rights. And that's 90% of men, 96% of women, 99% of people between the ages of 18 and 24. Ethnicities, all over 90%. African Americans and Asian Americans, 99% support a constitutional amendment for equal rights. And even across the political spectrum, all over 90%. For women, even higher, 98% of Democratic women, 94% of Republican women. So the way we see it, this is really a no-brainer. And the only question that we can't figure out is why it's taken so long. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see a number of hands up. I'm just going to tell the members, I cannot take everybody because we're going to have a time problem. Ms. Schaefer, you haven't asked a question.
Yes.
Ms. Sherman.
First, I would like to thank you so much for taking your time to come all the way here, Ms. Arquette, and on a Saturday. And Ms. Neuwirth came all the way from New York after being in Washington. I appreciate that. We all do. What I'd like to know is, why is it that nothing has happened in Congress, no vote, no hearing, for 30-plus years? Why has this not been ratified? I mean, we are over 50% or more of the electorate. Why? And I have two questions, and then I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on the poll you mentioned. But I really want to know, and I really think that I know it's time. It's beyond time. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that it's not just women in America that are being affected by us not having the Equal Rights Amendment. We're also not protecting women worldwide. We haven't signed on to CEDAW, which is the international policy to protect women, because we haven't already passed the ERA. We forced Afghanistan and Japan to put gender provisions in their constitutions, but we don't have it in ours. And in a day and age when we have women locked up and being burned in cages in other countries, I think an important message is to say, women in the United States matter. They're our daughters, they're our sisters, they're our lovers, they're our friends. And they have equal rights in the United States of America. And we really cannot say that to the world. We have no right to say that in the world. And that's a gross miscarriage of justice.
As I often say, we're better than that.
I hope we are.
Ambassador Sherman.
I just actually am going to tag on to what my colleague Bonnie Schaefer said. I'm old enough to have been in Congress working as a chief of staff at the time we tried to do this. And I remember vividly Ted Kennedy sitting up in the vice president's office, willing to meet with any senator to try to move this forward. And we have not been able to get the job done. And I think it is in part because, as you said, people assume it exists. And I think it's also because getting a constitutional amendment through the Senate has been very, very difficult, as getting CEDAW through, as you rightly pointed out, Ms. Arquette, when we are way behind so much of the rest of the world, is because the Senate has not been able to do any treaty. When Bob Dole comes to the Senate floor for the Disabilities Treaty in a wheelchair and, as a Republican, cannot get it done, it speaks to how important it is to not only ensure that we have a Democratic president, but that we have a Democratic Senate to have any chance at all.
Well, I have to say something else. Frankly, I've been in Washington a lot, meeting with a lot of different leaders, trying to talk to people on both sides of the aisle. And some Democrats said to me, you know, they may have their name on a bill, but it doesn't mean they're actually doing anything. And someone said to me, quite frankly, well, women are not hot. And it's funny because we're constantly being referenced. Are we beautiful? Are we hot? Are we not hot? What do we look like? They said women's issues aren't hot. So we don't even matter at all, and neither do our issues. And this was a Democrat, a Democratic leader. So this has to come from in this room. And you guys in this room have a lot of power too, to make this a hot issue. Because, I mean, I only had a limited time, but I didn't even get to talk about women in California who were made to sign papers while they were giving birth, and they were given hysterectomies without their consent in the United States of America.
Ms. Tandon.
Thank you so much for your remarks and for locating women's rights in the broad sweep of progressive policies that we need to really look at. I want to ask you very quickly, there are a suite of policies in the United States which really stand out in being separate and apart from the rest of the world that happen to affect women. The United States is the only industrialized country in the world that does not have a national paid leave policy. Disproportionately affects women. We have very little support for childcare in this country. Other developed countries invest a lot more in childcare. Disproportionately affects women. And I wanted to ask you, do you think if we look at the ERA and other policies around these issues, it will also build support for some of these economic discrepancies women are facing?
I do. I really think that would give it a different kind of scrutiny, that we could examine these things and really look at them once and for all. Look, if we're looking at 118 years for women to be able to be paid fairly, we need to make a radical change. We know the way we've been doing it hasn't been working. We need to give women every legal tool they need to examine all of these issues. I mean, there are some pregnancy provisions right now, but they're not working. A woman can still be fired for going to the bathroom to go pee too often when she's pregnant, or for carrying a water bottle. It's crazy, and the things that are happening to women are inexcusable, and everyone who has some power can make their voice heard right now. And I don't know, is the Democratic Party the People's Party, or is it not? Or is it the male People's Party? Because I think it's time for them to really step up the game and make a change for America. And look, poverty has a lot to do with women. Child hunger, we have 1 in 5 hungry kids in America. A majority of them have single moms. What are we going to do about this? It will help us address a lot of issues. We have the fastest growing group of incarcerated people are women. And often when a woman has to defend her own life in a domestic abuse situation and murders her partner who was about to kill her, she gets 26 years for that crime of defending her own life. We have to be able to look at this fairly, and we have so much bias in this country.
Ms. Parker.
Yes, I just want to thank you as a Native American woman, as a Native American survivor. I'm not sure what you said. There's so much work to do, and so I thank you for your courage, and I know we lack a lot of time. This should be at least a full day on this issue alone, but I know many of us, I believe all of us here, are committed to improving the platform, especially for women and those who are disenfranchised. So I just thank you. I'm going to send you with one of our Indigenous women's magazines. So we're working hard against domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence. There's so much work to do, but with people like you and those who are courageous to come forward and tell their stories, we will make a change. There's no way that so much violence should be here in the United States against women, against disenfranchised, and we do have our young boys who are being hurt as well. So I just hope that we can heal this nation as we need to, and so continue that courageous fight, and just thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to say as a last thing, I mean, women are making 78 cents on the dollar, white women. Black women are making 64 cents on the dollar right now. Native American women are making 54 cents on the dollar, and Latino women are making 55 cents on the dollar. If we don't drastically look at the gender pay gap, we will be economically suppressing people of color for a whole nother generation, besides our whole nation. But if we allow this, there will be no game change. We need to use every possible thing we can to close this wage gap situation once and for all, and all of these other issues that are impacting all people.
Thank you very much. Thank you.